Welcome back to Sip&Talk. I'm Sunny.
I'm Joe. I'm really excited about what we're getting into today because it comes straight from questions you sent us. And they hit on some fascinating, really fundamental stuff about, why people move across borders, what that little passport book actually unlocks.
Yeah, the power of the passport.
Exactly. And honestly, how countries sort of see each other and interact. We've got some really interesting ground to cover, especially looking at the dynamics around China and Taiwan based on the information you shared.
It's a stack of questions that really gets to the heart of some complex global issues, human movement, state policies, international trust. It all weaves together, and not always in obvious ways. We have some pretty compelling points here that can, I think, help us unpack these exact dynamics.
Absolutely. So our mission together in this deep dive is to really sift through this information, try to understand what it tells us about, like, immigration trends, the surprisingly huge differences in visa-free access.
Right, where you can go.
Yeah, exactly. And what might be driving the interactions between these places and, well, the rest of the world. We're aiming for insight, maybe a few surprising facts, and definitely a conversation that feels, well, like a deep dive. Let's just jump right in.
Let's do it.
Okay, so the first big question you asked, and it's a really thought-provoking one, is this. China's global influence, its economy, they've grown enormously, right?
Undeniably.
So if things are supposedly going so well, why are we seeing so many reports, so much data suggesting that a significant number of people actually want to leave? And how does that picture look compared to Taiwan?
It does seem like a contradiction on the surface, doesn't it? You hear about the growth, the rising power. You'd assume people would be eager to stay. But the information points to a notable trend of people leaving China, often through means that aren't, let's say, standard international travel. We're seeing data about what's often called jumping ship.
Jumping ship. That's a powerful term. What exactly does that mean here?
It essentially refers to people overstaying their visas in other countries, or maybe entering those countries without authorization, often using irregular routes.
Okay.
And coupled with that, we see evidence of, well, organized human smuggling efforts.
Ah, got it. So not just booking a flight and moving legally, but finding ways across borders outside the system. And the numbers you mentioned, seeing what do they actually look like? Are they significant?
They are quite striking, particularly looking at arrivals in the U.S. There's been a significant surge, really, in Chinese citizens arriving at U.S. borders without authorization.
A surge.
Yeah. At the U.S.-Mexico border, for instance, the numbers jumped from around 24,300 unauthorized entries in fiscal year 2023 to about 38,200 in FY 2024.
Oh, just in 1 year.
Just in that 1 year span, that's a huge increase. And even at the U.S.-Canada border, the numbers went up too, from about 6,700 to 12,400 in recent years.
Wow, that jump at the U.S.-Mexico border.
Yeah.
That's not just a slight increase, is it? That's massive. It really suggests something is, well, pushing people towards these really difficult journeys.
It certainly does. And alongside that data on irregular crossings and potential overstays, we see information about organized human smuggling. Now, this isn't entirely new. It has a history, apparently, especially from coastal areas in China like Fujian and Zhejiang, going back decades.
Right.
These operations are often run by organized groups, and the cost is incredibly high. We see reports anywhere from like $10,000 to $50,000 per person.
$10,000 to $50,000. For one person.
Per person, yeah.
That's staggering. I mean, for many people, $50,000 is life-changing money. Enough to buy property, start a business, to spend that on a risky, unauthorized journey. It really highlights a profound motivation, maybe even desperation.
It speaks volumes, I think, about the challenges and risks people are willing to face. And the risks are very real, dangerous transit, sometimes by sea. We even see reports that places like Hong Kong and occasionally even Taiwan have been used as transit points in some cases.
So putting it together, are we talking about just a handful of people, or is this happening at a significant scale?
Well, the estimates based on this unauthorized movement data suggest tens of thousands of people leaving China annually through these means. Smuggling, or this jumping ship phenomenon.
Tens of thousands a year.
And it's worth noting, China seems to be reacting to this trend, reportedly increasing penalties for illegal immigration, like doubling fines, longer detention times.
Okay, so the picture for China, based on this information, is one of significant unauthorized immigration, with a government actively trying to curb it. Now let's contrast that directly with Taiwan. What does the data show there?
It's a fundamentally different situation. The phenomenon of Taiwanese citizens jumping ship is, well, exceptionally rare.
Really?
Yeah. The data points we have indicate that when there are issues with illegal stay within Taiwan, it overwhelmingly involves foreign workers, not Taiwanese citizens trying to leave illegally. For example, I think around 1,200 cases of illegal stay by foreign workers were reported back in 2020.
So Taiwan's challenge with illegal stay is mostly people trying to get in and stay, maybe for work, rather than its own citizens trying to sneak out.
Precisely. And instances of Taiwanese citizens illegally overstaying in other countries are reported as very rare, on a vastly smaller scale compared to the trend from China, actual illegal immigration. So, Taiwanese citizens being smuggled out of Taiwan. It's extremely uncommon based on the information available.
But people from Taiwan do move abroad, right? Just legally.
Absolutely, and that's the key difference. Most Taiwanese who move abroad do so legally. In 2020, for instance, about 61,973 Taiwanese citizens legally moved overseas.
Okay.
And interestingly, many of their common destinations were actually mainland China, Hong Kong, and Macau, as well as the United States.
That's a fascinating detail right there. Legal movement to mainland China being significant for Taiwanese, while we're seeing so many mainland Chinese trying to leave China, often illegally.
It is interesting, isn't it?
And you even mentioned occasional reports of mainland Chinese trying to smuggle into Taiwan, which again is the opposite direction of the trend we just discussed for China.
Yes, though apparently rare, it highlights that the pressures and dynamics driving movement are quite distinct. And another point of contrast. Taiwan's penalties for illegal stay are presented as significantly lighter than the stricter ones reported in China.
Okay, so if we boil down this first section based on the information, the core difference is pretty clear. China faces significant unauthorized immigration, seems driven by pressures pushing people towards risky methods. While Taiwan has very little of this, most outward movement is entirely legal and, well, orderly. This stark contrast brings us beautifully to the next question from our listener.
Which naturally follows, right? Why is that difference so extreme? Why do Taiwanese citizens so rarely need to jump ship? And what explains the dramatic gap in passport power? You know, the visa-free access difference?
Ah, yes, the power of the passport. It's like this little booklet that's your ID. But globally, it kind of reflects how welcome or trusted you are when you travel. And the difference here, based on the numbers, is immense. The information shows Taiwan's passport allows visa-free entry to far more countries, estimated around 145 by 2025.
145, yeah. Compared to China's passport, which is around 53 countries.
145 versus 53. That number alone tells you a lot about international relationships and, I guess, perceived risk.
It does, but it's not just the sheer number, it's where you can go, right? Taiwan's passport grants visa-free access to a large number of countries in Europe, the US, Japan, South Korea, places like that.
Right. Major developed economies.
Yeah. China's visa-free list, by contrast, includes many countries in Africa and Asia with significantly fewer Western nations. And it's noted that some of the recent visa-free deals with European countries are only temporary, set to expire in late 2025.
So Taiwan ranks much higher on those global passport mobility indexes. This difference isn't just about convenience. It reflects international recognition and how other countries assess the risk associated with travelers from each place.
It absolutely does. Now, when we look at why China's visa-free access seems concentrated more in African and Asian countries, the information heavily points towards geopolitics and economic strategy.
Right.
China is a major trade partner across Africa. Trade volume hit, $200 billion in 2019? And the Belt and Road Initiative, the BRI, which a large number of African countries are part of, plays a significant role.
So these visa agreements aren't primarily driven by just like cultural exchange or mass tourism for its own sake. They're more strategic.
That's the picture presented, yeah. They seem often designed to promote business ties, boost tourism linked to investment, and maybe facilitate the movement of Chinese workers and personnel connected to BRI projects.
Makes sense.
We see examples cited like Mauritius, Seychelles, Tunisia easing visa rules specifically to attract more Chinese visitors and foster economic cooperation. It looks like a clear instance of a country strategically using visa policy to advance its soft power and economic interests.
Okay, that helps explain the focus on countries involved in BRI or major trade partners. But then, why the different approach from Western countries? Why are they generally more restrictive for Chinese citizens?
Well, The reasons cited in the findings align with some concerns we touched on earlier. Western nations tend to maintain stricter visa requirements, apparently due to concerns they have about potential illegal immigration.
Linking back to the jumping ship data.
Exactly, directly linking back to that surge in unauthorized entries we discussed. There are also concerns noted about potential espionage and just broader geopolitical tensions, which contribute to a more cautious approach regarding who gets easy entry.
So it's a different calculation. A different assessment of potential risk versus potential benefit compared to, say, a country heavily invested in economic partnership through BRI.
That appears to be the dynamic described, yes. Countries weigh different factors, economic incentives, security concerns, potential immigration challenges, and those calculations lead to very different visa policies.
And this brings us back full circle to the first topic again. The high number of visa-free countries for Taiwan. That easy legal access for travel, maybe even exploring work.
Oh.
It seems directly connected to why Taiwanese citizens have little need or motivation to jump ship.
It seems logical, doesn't it?
Yeah. If you can travel freely and legally to so many places, why would you resort to dangerous, illegal methods?
Exactly. When legal pathways are readily available and widely accepted internationally, the incentive for unauthorized travel or overstaying just diminishes significantly.
That connects those 2 points beautifully. And it leads us right into our third question from the listener, which gets into the perception and motivation behind these international reactions. It asks, are these restrictions, this international caution, these stricter visa rules faced by China, is it simply about other countries trying to suppress a strong, rising power?
That's a really insightful question. And based on the information provided, the picture seems more nuanced than just simple suppression. The reasons cited for international caution appear rooted in specific actions, policies, and perceived risks, rather than solely a desire to keep China from being powerful.
Okay, so what are those specific reasons, according to the information? Things distinct from just trying to hold China back.
Well, we've already discussed some of them. Concerns about the risks of illegal migration, remember that surge in border crossings.
Right.
Worries about espionage, existing geopolitical tensions. These are all factors that influence how other countries view the risk of granting easier access. But the information also points very strongly to China's own internal controls and exit policies as a significant contributing factor.
China's internal policies. How do those affect how other countries treat Chinese travelers? That seems counterintuitive.
Well, the findings indicate that China has very strict exit controls, and this includes the increasing use of apparently arbitrary exit bans.
Exit bans.
Yeah. These bans can prevent both Chinese citizens and even foreign executives working in China from leaving the country, sometimes with little to no clear explanation or due process. Reports highlight a significant increase in court cases related to these exit bans in recent years.
So the information suggests China itself makes it unpredictable and difficult for people to leave, sometimes without warning, even for its own citizens.
Yes, that's what's indicated. And crucially, the information also touches on why people in China might desire to leave in the first place.
The motivations.
Right. It cites reasons like political control, censorship, restrictions on speech. Concepts like the run philosophy, which has been discussed, seem to reflect a growing dissatisfaction with political constraints. Maybe a feeling of being restricted, perhaps amplified after experiences like the strict lockdowns. These internal factors, as presented in the information, seem to contribute to the desire for some to emigrate, and for others, maybe the desire for unauthorized emigration when legal avenues are limited or blocked. This resulting unauthorized emigration, in turn, can raise red flags for other countries when they're assessing visa policies.
Okay, so it's less about simply wanting to suppress China's strength and more about other countries reacting to specific internal policies and behaviors within China. Things that lead to outcomes like a surge in unauthorized immigration or concerns about legal predictability for individuals.
That appears to be the dynamic described in the material we looked at. It suggests there's maybe a tension here.
A tension?
Yeah, between maybe what many in the international community might expect from a major global power, perhaps a move towards greater openness, adherence to international norms on free movement, information access, and maybe a feeling within some parts of China that its growing strength means it doesn't need to conform to external expectations and can prioritize control instead.
It sounds like a complex interaction. China's actions, its internal policies like these controls and exit bans and the resulting emigration trends, those things can directly impact how it's perceived internationally.
Right.
And that can lead to cautious responses from other nations, like stricter visa rules or travel advisories. The information suggests this is less about a raw desire to keep China down and more about reactions to the specific ways China operates and the consequences, like that noticeable rate of unauthorized immigration.
That seems to be a key takeaway from this analysis, yeah.
This really brings everything we've discussed together then. Looking at all these pieces, the different scales and methods of immigration, the huge gap in passport power, the reasons for international caution, the internal realities. What does this picture tell us about the core drivers behind people wanting to leave and the fundamental differences between China and Taiwan, according to this data?
Well, it suggests that the desire to leave China, particularly through these challenging or unauthorized channels, seems significantly shaped by internal factors. Things like political pressures control, censorship, a perceived lack of freedom combined with economic uncertainties.
Okay.
And importantly, this seems compounded by those strict official exit policies and the limited legal travel freedom we noted earlier.
So it's a complex mix, seeking more freedom, more opportunity, while facing constraints both politically and practically in leaving legally.
That seems to be the picture. Now, contrasting that once more with Taiwan, while people there also consider moving for economic reasons, housing costs, wages.
Sort of like anywhere.
Right. But the information indicates that political freedom and easy legal international travel are the norm. This means that for Taiwanese citizens, legal immigration, temporary work abroad, or just traveling freely are the standard pathways, not illegal jumping ship.
It really highlights how different internal realities and government approaches directly shape citizens' options, their desires for mobility, and how that, in turn, influences a place's international standing, reflected in things like passport power and visa rules.
Exactly. The internal environment and the external realities seem deeply intertwined here.
This deep dive, prompted by your excellent questions, really makes you stop and think. Looking at all this information we've gone through, what does it ultimately suggest about the choices a powerful nation makes on the global stage? Does increasing strength naturally lead towards building greater international trust and responsibility through, say, openness and predictability?
Or does it sometimes lead towards prioritizing internal control and potentially facing external caution as a result?
Yeah.
It's a profound question that the data we've explored certainly seems to raise, something worth mulling over as you look at global trends, I think.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for bringing these incredibly fascinating and important questions to us. We really hope this deep dive has given you, our listener, a clearer, maybe more nuanced picture of the complex factors at play here. I just want to give another shout out to Micky from Micky to Life. His channel is a treasure trove of inspiration, and he's a huge Sip&Talk fan.
Absolutely. Make sure to check him out and maybe even share your awesome podcast intro with him once you've created it.